koutou. Thank you very much for having us here this morning. I just wanted to start by just acknowledging the impact of the cyclone and the impact on the loss of lives, loss of livelihoods, loss of assets, and loss of well-being throughout the region, and know that everyone's had a tough time since that event and continues to work on the recovery. So I just want to acknowledge everyone in the region who's putting effort into supporting the recovery, and in that regard also want to pay tribute and thanks to the Regional Council for your role both in supporting the establishment of our agency and the funding pathways for the government, and also your active support in helping the agency with the planning for the region and going about the recovery. So, excuse me, thank you very much for that. Ross is going to give you a brief presentation today just to outline kind of where we're at. Just to sort of start with that process, as a reminder, the agency was activated around March, April. We really only got going properly in July once we got full funding from the Crown confirmed at the very end of June, and during that time it's been quite a busy period mobilising the team and working with all the relevant stakeholders across the region. It's great that we've managed to secure to date sort of around $1 billion for the region and various recovery efforts for the primary sector, for all the asset impacts across the region. And as everyone's aware, there's more to do, and part of today's presentation will focus on some of that effort that we need to get into now, particularly with the new incoming government. There's obviously conversations we need to have to understand their appetite, interest and willingness to support us as we try and do more, having only really just got started on the recovery efforts. So with that intro, I'll just hand you over to Ross, and we're happy to take questions, as many as you've got whilst we're here. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to be with you here this morning to be able to give an update on the recovery and where things are heading, and particularly want to add my thanks to those of Blair's. We've enjoyed a good working relationship with Nick and his team, and Hinewai supporting with the leadership with the mayors. So really want to thank the Regional Council for their efforts, the work that's going in, particularly around flood protection, but the range of other things that the Regional Council is working to address as well. Louise and her team and the other Regional Council staff that are working closely with us across the broad range of recovery activities, whether that touches transport planning, all sorts of the areas that we're involved in. So really wanting to add my thanks and acknowledgement of the work and effort that's going in. Whoops.
Here, I think it's the wrong slide deck. It's Friday's slide deck from last week.
We've got the wrong presentation actually. Should have noticed that. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, I opened the wrong file.
We've got them here, so if you want to say, Ross, you're going to the second slide, we'll know what it is.
Okay.
It's one that says recovery process.
We've got the right one. Oh, no, been there, done that too.
Quite versatile. We can talk to whatever presentation. I'm not sure we'll get it all right, but we'll give it a go.
Have a good crack.
Just in the middle at the top there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
That's it.
Might be easier.
It was well spotted.
Thank you.
Right.
Having
I'm familiar.
Just dawning on me that what was on the screen was different from.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess in terms of a progress report, the key thing I think has been how well the region has worked together in addressing this quite significant impacts on people from lives lost, but issues of damage, silt and debris across the Rohi, impacts on transport links, a whole range of psychosocial and other impacts. And the region has come together, the Matariki partners, councils and mana whenua organisations working with the public sector and NGOs and others to support communities to restore vital infrastructure, to address silt and debris and to support businesses and other sectors that are working to address the recovery as well. Obviously, the fossil process and the negotiations with the government were a huge part of that work that the councils were engaged in, and the RRA was sort of coordinating at the forefront of. We've moved on from that to the implementation work and the planning around that, which is quite a critical part, and certainly I know taking up a lot of the headspace of your staff at the regional council is we move into the phase of delivering on flood protection and the other issues for the other councils. Standing up the recovery sort of apparatus has been part of the work, and working with communities and various sectors to seek funding. We have had about 1.5 billion in government funding allocated to the region at this stage. It wasn't all it was asked for, but it is going to make a difference in some of those areas, and obviously now turning our minds more towards resilience and some of the opportunities that emerge with investing in resilience. There's probably going to be $4 to $5 billion in funding that comes into the region, principally directed at infrastructure, and how we direct that and how it's channeled can obviously have some significant positive impacts, both in terms of what's delivered but also how it's delivered, and that's also a focus for us.
Did you say 4 to 5 billion coming into the region, Ross?
I would think so, yeah, over the long term when you look at the program of particularly roading work and other things that needs to be, I mean, that's going to be over a 10 to 12 year window, I'd say, but I think that's a broad sort of an estimate.
Unfunded at this stage, some of it, but
yeah.
So that includes the 1.5 today?
Yeah.
Is that largely out of that National Resilience Fund?
Well, I think as Blair said, it's unfunded at the moment, but I think a lot of it will be out of transport funding sources, and that's my estimate. But it's if you look at the damage to the roading networks of the councils, that's over $1 billion. If you look at the what's sort of being promulgated with respect to the state highways, there'll be investment around power infrastructure and other things. So. It may be out as an estimate, but I think it's a reasonable one to work on at the moment. I think, and again, I won't touch too much on this, but there's obviously been the first iteration of the recovery plan. There's been a lot of work involved, and essentially our key role is why we were set up was to coordinate across the region and with government. So a lot of work going into that. Quite a lot of work assisting the Matariki partners with their own individual projects. So we've been working closely with Nick's team on silt and debris, sort of trying to secure more funding for that. It seems to be an ongoing area of activity. We've been working with Mangahara Tangitu on some of their Category 3 fossil sort of negotiation issues. Working with Te Waihanga on the infrastructure pipeline of work, planning out what the program's going to be and how that might be managed and what the workforce requirements look like. And there's a lot of phasing and sequencing work to do there still, and offering a government relations sort of capability as part of the work that we've been doing. So just, I guess, recapping on our context, as Blair said, we were established by the Matariki Governance Group with government support, fully funded by the government through to June 2025 to support regional recovery efforts. We've got that governance, dual sort of governance sort of overview. We are not a decision maker, obviously, but do have a role in priority setting in coordinating advocacy and assurance to government and supporting our partner organisations within the region. I think as we move forward with infrastructure, resilience and investment taking a big part, that programming and phasing and sequencing role is going to become more and more central to our work, and that's been some of that's been locked into the agreement with the Crown around the fossil infrastructure investment, where the Crown wants the RRA to play a role in that program management and monitoring. One of the things I've talked about, the transition there to that resilience. We've still got quite a bit of restoration work to roll out. It's a fairly thick and long tail, but starting to think about how we can build resilience into our systems and networks, and how we can capture opportunities that come along with doing that. If you're looking at State Highway 2 North and you're looking at resilience around that and taking out some of the weak spots, you also get to, well, is there an opportunity to really reduce the commute between Napier and Wairoa and the economic advantages that come with that? So that's something we're very keen to work with Waka Kotahi on and others to look at how that can be advanced. Obviously, as I said before, the aspirations in the first round of resilience plans and locality plans that went into the regional plan, they were larger than the resources available, given the current fiscal position the government is in, so there's a lot of unfunded things in there, but there are a lot of things that were funded, and I think we're now waiting to see how the election pans out and then re-engage with government in the post-election period, and along with the chief executives, we're equipping the region to be able to do that on a strong basis.
And have we had any indication of when the new government might meet to discuss steps forward?
We're sort of we're expecting that a government will be sworn in next week at some stage. That's not written in stone anywhere, but that's just some of the intelligence we've picked up. And then obviously they'll probably have a few things to do, but certainly they're hearing that engaging with Hawke's Bay on recovery issues is a reasonably important thing in there, and the things they need to do. So we're expecting that to occur before Christmas, and we're actively working to support that with the CEOs and others. Just looking a little bit more at that restoration phase work, obviously the first iteration recovery plan's gone to government, and there's been engagement on that. You'll have seen quite a lot of government response to that, the investments in infrastructure and property buyouts through the fossil negotiations, funding announcements towards the Kanoa Fund to support the primary sector businesses affected, tourism support, regional business partners, additional support. Again, some of those things, not all that we asked for, but some support coming our way. Waka Kotahi obviously taking initial investment actions and have formed the Trek Alliance with Kiwi Rail and some partners. That initial work is very much on restoration and restoring links. There's been funding through the public sector in terms of community and whānau sector support, quite a lot in psychosocial support, and there's been other funding coming via BAU sort of votes into various areas of recovery support. And I guess the clear message we've had from government is that the resourcing available doesn't meet all the things asked for, that the region needs to get on and move forward its own priorities where that it thinks need to be moved forward, but also that round two, I guess, the budget cycle, 4-year budget cycle commencing in 24 is likely to be asked to, submit not perhaps the large list of things that were submitted in Plan 1, but really nail down what the priorities are. So that's an area that the region's looking at in terms of looking at a briefing to incoming ministers, our recovery plan 2.0, quite a tightly focused set of priorities, and then how we feed that into the budget and planning cycles. Peter.
Just a question on the restoration resilient plan. How does that, was there any mention of the marae? And obviously they go for restoration, and then 60% of the maraes are taken out in Ahuriri at the moment. So I just, I couldn't see in the plan how that was factored into the equation.
I think those issues were raised in the plan. We had plans from PSG and Hapu groups that signalled those areas. I think they are being likely to be picked up on a case-by-case basis if they are picked up. Certainly the marae at Tangoil is a focus of the negotiations for the Category 3 land that's happening in that area. So I think it will be, there's been no broad allocation from the government of funding, so it will need to be addressed on a case-by-case basis.
So you're saying individual maraes need to lobby government? And I can give more to you, I chair more to, and then obviously we're rebuilding, but limited support, and we're doing things ourselves, and same for a lot of the other maraes. So, I went for a visit to all the maraes yesterday with the independent group that was going through the review, and I just listened to all the kōrero that went on, and obviously a lot of concerns are raised.
I think probably my observation is that while there may not have been broad allocations of recovery-specific funding for marae or other particular projects, there are BAU sources of funding that are being accessed for some projects. So I think working through those, some of those with DIA and other agencies may be the best way forward.
I think the wider issue that Mr Eden's also raising is that the whenua Māori conversations were direct with government rather than through regional council. And of course our next paper is on looking to wind up this Cyclone Recovery Committee, which will go back to EICC, our Environment Committee, and just picking up those concerns around whenua Māori of their direct conversations with government, and wanting to make sure through the RRA that there's an advocacy or a connection there to make sure that those pieces are picked up where they may have been picked up through some of our teams currently. So is it also TPK that some of those conversations are happening, or is it really DIA?
Well, DIA and TPK are providing, but I suppose for yourselves, and how does that function in the equation?
Well, we're certainly happy to help, and we've been primarily our engagement has been at PSG level, but we're certainly happy to help where we can aid and provide assistance. We're working actively alongside some of the PSGs and Marae, so very happy to have further conversations. I guess another reflection would be a lot of the focus at the moment has been on marae and Category 3 land, and I'm imagining Motior is probably Category 2 or Category 1.
Category 2, yeah.
Yeah, so, but very happy to have follow-up conversations.
Thank you. And Councillor Ormsby?
Yeah, kia ora, Chair. Kia ora, kōrua. My question's around what you raised, Ross, around restoration versus resilience versus the resource that the Crown have sort of signalled to us around all the asks that we had in our first edition of the recovery plan. So from your point of view, and it can go to both you, Ross, and Blair, is what indicators and how confident as a region are we around what we're asking for in the resilience space versus a restoration plan? Because, resource can only go so far to build resilience. So what are some of the signals that you're getting from Crown, from officials in government agency around how far resilience can actually go for our region?
From my perspective, I think things are being addressed, and this may not be entirely fair, but they're being addressed on a sort of work stream or infrastructure asset basis, asset by asset. So if we look at transport, for instance, which is where a significant proportion of the damage has occurred, you see Waka Kotahi starting to think about resilience and how you make some of those key lifeline routes less susceptible to future impacts. And I think that's a really good thing. But then, we've got to be cognizant of the context of, the funding picture where the National Land Transport Fund is at. It's good that the $6 billion over 4 years for resilience has been allocated. That's for the whole country, or particularly the highest impacted region. It's not just for the East Coast. But I think the signals are there that those resilience issues are going to be addressed. It's just a matter of over time aligning the funding with those issues. I think, part of me is optimistic because if you look at Christchurch, it's 12 years on from the earthquakes, they're still undertaking recovery projects. And this isn't going to happen even though everybody's put their work programs in that it's going to happen into the next 2 to 5 years. There's not going to be the funding to do it in 2 to 5 years, or the workforce. So I think over time, the signals are there that we, there is a alignment of intention to address resilience. I think we need to be focused as a region that we don't get so far and then stop if we go on a piece-by-piece business case model where the cost benefit for the next investment reduces when you've done the last one already. State Highway 5 resilience, State Highway 2 North resilience, the 4-laning of the expressway, State Highway 50 through Central Hawke's Bay. Those are key routes with resilience issues and the opportunity to make a real difference for the region. And then in the local roading networks as well, if you think about the freight distribution strategy and inputs into that last, that farm gate, orchard gate to processing all the arterial is a really important part of that network where we need to be looking at resilience and hoping that the funding is made available for that, again, over that sort of 10-year window.
I just add a couple of comments to that. For the restoration piece, that's the sticking plaster part of the solution we have to work on. I think the headline there is that the government's not going to fund everything, and the message from the Crown is it's not its responsibility to pay for everything, and we saw that through some of the negotiations that there's a view that private parties and the region need to find a way to pay for that, and that short-term sticking plaster piece where every entity in the region's finding its own way to fund what it can, and we've largely got what we've got from the government on that, and there might be a little bit more to get in the short term, but the longer term picture, as Ross pointed out, is a timing issue, and I think as much as we've had a crisis, it creates an opportunity for us to have a long-term strategic view of the priorities in the region. We need to look past the next couple of years for funding and actually put together a 10 plus 20-year kind of view of funding for infrastructure for the region, and that needs to be able to look through the governments of the day so that we are developing a strategic coordinated infrastructure plan for the region that builds that resilience in. And who pays for that remains the big question we have to work on, and as Ross will talk to in a minute, in terms of each annual budget the government goes through, our goal as a collective region is to put our case in and secure as much as we can for the immediate and the longer term funding pathways, and then work out how we pay for the rest ourselves, which unfortunately is the reality of life. So,
But as you say, it's having that 10 or 15-year plan ahead that we're working towards a coordinated plan across the region.
Thank you for painting that broader picture. Thank you.
Councillor Curtin.
Yeah, thank you. Blair, just picking up on that, and I think you've sort of hit the nail on the head. We can't expect the cavalry to come over the hill from central government. We're on our own to some extent. But I'm just interested to know how we play this out. We've got the Regional Council obviously standing up river protection, trying to plug that hole. We haven't worked out a plan to build better yet, but we're working on that. We've got some avenues through Wakakotahi to look at the roading network, but we've got a whole range of other lifeline infrastructure that needs coordinating and protecting. For example, our vulnerability around power supply, telecommunications was another major, cut off from say health resources, etc. Another. We've got 5 councils. There needs to be some measure of, if you like, agreement around if you're going to put a bridge back up, how high is it going to be and what does it look like. So we've got this mix of other, or a mix of high priority development to take place, and yet we're a diverse region, diverse governance, and assets that are not immediately available to us. How do we bridge this thing?
I mean, starting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great question, and it's actually the opportunity that's presented to us as a region from this event that we can rapidly increase our maturity around how we plan our asset management for the region. And there's been a lot of good work done, but it's highlighted that the integration of that work across the critical infrastructure in the region could be improved, I think, with resilience in mind in particular, and for planning workforce, as Ross has touched on a couple of times already. We're simply just not going to be able to get all the work done. We're going to need 8,000 new employees in the next 5 years if we're going to do all the work we think we're going to do, and we don't have homes for nearly all of them. So we've got some unpicking to do there. So the team has stood up an infrastructure working group to bring together a lot of those parties within the region, power, telecoms, the councils and other parties, to start to paint that picture of what were the issues that were there before, what are the issues that are there now, what's the funding requirements, and then most importantly in terms of our entity as the role as an integrator is then to try and get all those bits to kind of hang together and not to usurp some of the systems that are already in place within the region, like the RLTP, but to actually enhance that by broadening it out to some of those other factors that weren't necessarily all included in a highly integrated way. So that's quite a lot of the work to be done. It has started already, and there's been a number of engagements across those entities within the region. And the good news is that the appetite from all the parties in the region is exceptionally high to be part of those conversations. The test for us is, can we keep those groups alive and working together as we work through the hard part of fixing things and then the harder part of planning for the future.
So just to add a little bit of detail to that, Unison have agreed to take the lead on the electricity sector resilience sort of planning with Transpower. They've agreed terms of reference for that. We sort of suggested it was a white paper. I think they've called it something different, but they're planning to have that first piece of work done by December, looking at the scope for resilience sort of options and investments that needed. Transpower's done some initial work around their Redcliffe station, but that's also looking at resilience into the future as decarbonisation and other things happen across the network. READA have for us commissioned a piece of work on telecoms resilience, and that is well underway. We've had input into that, and we'll be engaging, and that's engaging with the telco sector obviously as well, but we'll be engaging with them once that piece of work has become available, which shouldn't be too far off. The councils are working together quite well in developing some of their repair programs with the various impacts, particularly on the rural roading networks, Wairoa, Central Hawke's Bay and Hastings. Hastings are also working closely with Napier on the bridge connections that have been knocked out. And they've also made good progress because they're having to for the Crown-funded pieces of those works through infrastructure. So I agree with Blair, that's a very good question and is part of the challenge. But so far we're seeing people working together well in a coordinated fashion. There's been agreement that the interrelation with your own work on flood protection and the bridge links across rivers, there needs to be design collaboration there so that things are being designed at the right height. That also flows through to the likes of the Awatoto bridges on rail and state highways when we get to the final solutions for those. So those issues are all in people's minds. There are good conversations going on. The key challenge is making sure that coordination and goodwill continues into the future.
Sounds excellent.
Well, early days.
It does sound
Early
excellent.
days.
It hasn't gone wrong yet. So that's good.
We are getting a little bit short on time. We've got Councillor Rodley, but do you have many more slides, Ross?
I can whiz through them.
Let's take Councillor Rodley's question.
I was going to say, thank you for your fulsome answer. That was my question.
Oh, that was your question too. Okay. All right. Thanks, Ross.
And I think, Joe, just those, our mission from the region really is building back better, safer and smarter. And those key questions, how do we ensure what we rebuild and restore is resilience? How do we ensure the investment in recovery that the money I talked about before is used to capture opportunities and improvements? And then how do we channel that investment so that it's maximising benefits, whether that's through workforce development, legacy sort of assets left behind, or all manner of things, progressive procurement. Those are sort of some of the key areas of focus.
Councillor McIntosh?
Ross, your focus on resilience is not just resilience in the event of a flood, is it?
No, obviously the tendency is to focus on the event you've just had, but there are other dimensions to resilience that need to be thought about.
Yeah, we'll just add some colour to that. So the least intelligent thing we could do is plan our future around the fact we had a flood in the past. We need to plan our future around all of the risks that are in front of us, and from a critical infrastructure planning perspective, a regional economic resilience perspective, we need to widen that lens, and that's certainly the intent from the agency. Even though we're called a recovery agency, our bias is more towards helping the region plan for whatever the future holds on the back of what happened in the past. And a great example of that is water security, where, actually capturing water as opposed to diverting it somewhere else as a priority is a critical risk for the region to manage, and will be one of, the priorities that we believe needs to be articulated on an ongoing basis for the region, because yesterday it was too much water to deal with, tomorrow it will be not enough, and as a region we've got to be really strategic in how we move forward from here.
You could be quoting Councillor McIntosh. Councillor Harding?
Kia ora, Chair. Kia ora kōrua. Look, my question is around engagement with the public and the extent of visibility and visibility, buy-in, but also influence that the public may expect to have in this sort of a long-term planning process. So with the best will in the world, it's a fantastic approach in terms of having a really hard look and developing a really long-term infrastructure program, but best will in the world, probably at least half of that cost, let's say, is going to come back to the ratepayers of Hawke's Bay. So my question is, at what point do they get to have be able to indicate what their priorities may be, or because at some point you're going to have to make value judgments or judgment based on a set of criteria about what happens and when it happens. So prioritisation, also what happens and what doesn't.
Great.
What's the engagement, and also how that will work into the decisions and the individual work programs of councils like our one.
Individual councils, yeah.
It's a great question. So there's a couple of key points in response to that. Firstly, the recovery agency is not a community-facing entity. So from our perspective, we're working with the councils, PSGEs, government agencies and other major infrastructure providers in the region. And so we won't be directly engaging with the community because that's not our role, and we've only got a small team of a half a dozen odd people. And so that's part one of the story. Part two is there are platforms and processes already in place for engagement with the public, the likes of your own LTP and other processes. So our intention's to kind of dovetail into those processes and work with and through your own direct engagement with the community. And obviously there's 5 councils and the PSGs have their own means of doing that as well. And so we have to do some synchronisation around that. And for your LTP process in particular, it's how does that dovetail into the regional piece? So it's got to dovetail in both directions so that we can form a full regional view on these things. We are going to have to push a top-down approach to coming up with the initial set of priorities because we've got urgency around a new government coming in. We've got a budget 24 timetable coming up, so we've only now got a matter of weeks for us to really get in front of the new government in the early new year to go, these are the top priorities. I don't think there's anything going to be on that list that anyone would go, well, that's a dumb idea, because they're all going to be pretty obvious regional resilience infrastructure items. I think where the conversation will flow is what else piece is probably, what's not on that list and how do we discuss that as a regional priority. And we've got to work through with the likes of yourselves and the other councils and other parties in the region to go, how does that work from a community engagement perspective? So that's kind of the headline answer, is it's via existing platforms, not looking to in any way override those, making sure that there is an opportunity for the community to connect. And I guess we're probably looking to you more than the other way around just to make sure that feedback is coming into what essentially is always a challenging task to coordinate multiple players and come up with a view of what is the right answer. And that's really kind of what we're here to do, is do that, and we might have to make some calls along the way that says everyone doesn't agree, but this is what we have to throw up for now. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it gives useful clarity. What it does is put more weight on, more importance to what we do regionally in terms of our spatial planning in the future, and that is going to be the route that if we don't get it right, then we won't maximise our opportunities in recovery.
I agree, and I think there's an opportunity with all these things as a region to review how that stuff works currently versus how it could work in the future, and what's in scope and out of scope, and who leads. All of those things, require ongoing assessment as we lean into this. Do you want anything to that, Ross?
No, I thought that was a very good answer, Mr. Chairman. But just as you were talking there, Councillor Harding, about the importance of spatial planning, we were just having a conversation yesterday, the CEs, about how this is leading forward into that sort of dimension of thinking as we start to think about resilience, how we're accommodating growth into the future, very, very much part of the thinking.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ross.
So that slide is just an interesting one. We're sort of moving, I guess, the plan point 1.0 was around sort of that restoration, the focus really, and starting to think about what's the adaptive and transformative capacity as we move into those longer term thinking. And just sort of looking at some of the priority areas and how we are in that move space, some of the key areas, silt and debris is obviously primarily about restoration. But when we're looking at housing impacts, the short term is about temporary accommodation and providing help for people at a hard time. We had a housing crisis, particularly in the urban areas of Hawke's Bay, but also in central Hawke's Bay and Wairoa. Before the cyclone didn't help. There's programs going on. There's some really good programs that PSGEs are leading in housing with MHUD. Looking at how we address, housing needs, infrastructure again, moving from restoring connections into resilient electricity. Healthcare is another broader priority in the regional list as we're working through the BIM. Water security, again, one of those. Other areas of priorities, key on our list and key one we're working with Nick and his team is in that area of regulatory relief. How do we build the flood protection that we need and get that happening quickly when faced with the current sort of consenting pathway. So that's a key area of focus for us. Workforce development and freight and that transport funding, getting that enhanced far rate locked in for some of the work that needs to be done is going to be crucial for our councils with those large rural roading networks. And that's just our own internal sort of way of sort of describing some of the work we're doing, that resilience and opportunity capture work and the way we're going about that, working with and for our partner organisations and some of the technical delivery sort of mechanisms. And that's really just the outlook over the next few months. Our focus at the moment on preparing a BIM for the incoming government and then getting Plan 2.0 ready to feed into the budget process. We've also got work happening around that. We're trying to resource up to play a role in that programming and sequencing of some of those infrastructure programs, brokering those conversations across the region with external partners, really trying to drive the priorities that external partners like Waka Kotahi land on are driven by the region's priorities. That's sort of become a bit of a catch cry, so I'll be getting sick of the sound of me saying it. And then, working into what the programs and implementation of those look like into the future. So that's the end of the presentation, Madam Chair. Happy to answer any questions, but thank you for the opportunities, and again, thank you to the Council for the myriad support that's being provided and the close working relationships that are in existence.
Just perhaps a closing comment from me, and happy to take any other questions if you have time. The one thing that's not on the slide and we haven't discussed today is confidence, and I think for the region it's the essential ingredient for a fantastic future for this region. Yes, we've got challenges, there are opportunities here, but ultimately what's going to underpin our ability to tap into the funding from the Crown and to drive a successful region is the confidence that we can. And I think all of us have a really essential role to play in sort of moving out of the dark mood we've been in over the last 6 months with the foul weather and the impacts, and finding a way to really energise ourselves with the confidence that we can. And I just think that's going to be the part that brings investment into the region. It's going to be the part that lifts the spirits and allows existing entities to double down on their existing investments and look to growth. So that's just a closing comment from me.
Yeah, I agree, and I think your Plan 2.0 and the infrastructure plan is going to be a big part in that confidence, seeing that the infrastructure working groups coming up with a plan that we can all see the value in will be a huge part of that. But before we wind up, I might just ask our Chief Executive to add a few words.
Just through you, Chair, just to say a huge thank you to Blair and Ross and the team at the RRA. I think the last few months of coordination across the region, supporting leaders such as our Chair, mayors, leaders from Tangata Whenua, wouldn't have been possible without having a body to coordinate all of that across the region. And it's made a huge difference to our interactions with government to have the focus that the RRA has brought to that process. So I think it's been hugely valuable, and I think, Chair, along with the RRA team, you've pointed to one of the real opportunities we've got over the next 4 to 5 years, and that's around making sure we deliver the best sets of infrastructure we can for communities across the region. We won't see this scale of investment in the region again for a long time, provided we don't have some other natural disaster. So there's a real opportunity to make the best of it, and part of that is wrangling the agencies of central government to do the best they can for the region, particularly where we look at things like roading and the development of rail networks. So I think there's a critical role that the RRA is going to play in helping us deliver on that infrastructure program. So just to return the thanks to the team here for their work in recent months.
Thank you, Chief. Chair, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, thank you. Just to acknowledge the sentiment from our CE and thank you both, particularly in the negotiations with Crown around the fossil work. We couldn't have done it really without you connecting us with Crown and those officials. And then it's seen time and time again with the immediate silt funding that was received from the caretaker government. So your role is vital going forward as a region, and just really thank you for all the effort in the coordinating. It's a huge job, and you're right, confidence is our playing hand. And as a strength across the region, we're seen to Crown as being that. So you play a huge part in that. Thank you.
Excellent. We're just going to move to receive the report. Are you
Happy to
do
receive
that?
the report.
I'm happy
Thank
to
you.
second that from the chair, yes, and a warm thank you from all of us. You've heard how well that relationship's working. We're looking forward to seeing the next plan and to hear how your first conversations with the new government go. Of course, yeah. Thank you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.